What is up, metahumans? So today, we are going to talk about everything there is to know about gardening. It's a pretty big topic, so this is going to be a pretty long video, but I will put some timestamps down in the description so you can navigate to the places that have the information you need to know. So the first thing we want to talk about is we want to go ahead and talk about what gardening is. Now, the only real purpose for gardening in one's human is to make food. The food in this game is extremely important. If you're still in the novice season, you're probably not seeing that importance yet. But as you move into season 2, especially if you move into a hard mode season, you're going to really want to have some of those buffs like this 25% weapon damage from crumbly bread. The seafood and oil giving you extra resources when you mine. The securement soups giving you access to better chances to capture deviations, so you can catch those shiny deviations in some higher levels. Just a lot of really, really important stuff in here that you're going to want to have access to, so you're going to need to get that gardening started. So the first thing we want to talk about is we want to talk about how to get seeds. Now, getting seeds is extremely important for about 95% of the seeds available to you. All you have to do is you just come find the resource out here in the open, pick it, and you'll get some of the resource, and then sometimes you'll get a seed. Now, I'm having a little trouble getting one here. Sometimes it can take quite a few picks. But almost all of your resources have this. Your beets, your corn, your wheat, your saffrons, all of that stuff. All has... There we go, we got a wheat seed. So that's all you have to do is just go run around picking things, and then we'll talk a little bit later about how to multiply those seeds by using fertilizer when we get to the fertilizer section. So that's number 1, how to get seeds. Number 2, how to get seeds is by going and doing your Blackfell loot runs, or your loot runs around the map, opening up desk drawers, stuff like that. Specifically, you cannot get the tulip or hydrangea seeds in any other way, and you also can't get the morel seeds in any other way. So if you want morel seeds, you have to go and get them from those desks when you're doing your loot runs. And morel seeds are really important because morel seeds are what you need in order to make this canned seafood and oil right here. You need regular morels, and also a little trick here, deviated morels are what you use to make yanbao dumplings, which you sell for 10,000 energy links to any merchant. So a good use for your masala, a good use for your deviated morels and your wheats there. If you don't have, a way to make gold ingots or something like that to make your energy links every week, that can be an option. And then the last way that you can get seeds is you can actually buy them from some of the NPCs. Now, the seeds that you can buy from the NPCs can't be acquired in any other way. So you've got peppercorns can be purchased in Blackfell at the NPC in Blackfell here. You have tomato seeds can be purchased here in Greywater. You have cucumber seeds can be purchased down here in the Mayor's Market. And then the last one that you can get is the onion seeds, which can be purchased right over here at the Tall Grass Inn. You can purchase 3 of these a week, but really all you're going to need to do is purchase that first 3, and then I'll show you how to multiply those seeds really, really quickly here in just a moment. Now, the next thing that's going to be important is how to plant your seeds so that you can actually grow your crops and harvest them yourself here at home instead of having to go wander the wilds to try and find those things. So the first thing you're going to need is a planter box or a loamy soil. Now, normally people have been using planter boxes, but as I was doing some research for this, loamy soil only increases the amount of time it takes to grow your crops by about 15%, but it has the same yield values. So you get the same amounts from loamy soils that you do from planter boxes, which is that 3 to 5 for some of your standard crops. So that's really kind of important. And because you can put 4 loamy soils in about the same space that you can put a planter box, if you were trying to make a really, really compact garden, this might actually be a pretty good option for you, especially if you were trying to do something like grow a bunch of contaminated seeds for your acid farm or something like that. Could be a really, really interesting idea, and that's something I'm going to be experimenting with in the future, but I think that'll be really good for you. Now, the next thing you have to look at is you have to look at the water and the sunlight. So each plant actually requires a different amount of water and sunlight. So you see here, your mushroom seeds require somewhere between 50 and 90 irrigation and 70 and 100 lighting. You have your blueberries take between 50 and 100 irrigation and 50 and 100 lighting. So what I've found is 70-70 is a pretty good middle ground if you just want to grow a bunch of different stuff. But if you're going to be growing the same thing all the time, you want to make sure that you get those nailed down. Now, there are a couple of different ways that you can do these things. Number one, you can actually just add water straight into your planter box. Once you plant your seed in there, you can come in here and you can just hand water this thing and fill it up. Boom, right there. And now I've got 78. Right, I can put boiled water in there, fill that up. Boom, now I'm right up to 88. So your purified water does more than your boiled water. But you can just hand water that thing, and you can allow it to use natural sunlight. So whenever the sun is out, right, the sun will be down on it, and it'll give it a certain amount of light depending on where it is. And that can be used for getting that water and sunlight. But you can also do those things artificially by using some structures here. So the number one structure we've got under function facilities. The structures that we're going to be using here are grow lights and automatic irrigation facilities. These are not something you can access before week 2 because you have to unlock them in your mimetic screen, and they get unlocked during week 2. So you won't be able to use those until you get to week 2 of your season. But you'll see in here that I've got my automatic irrigation thing, and I've got my my grow light right up there. And these allow you to select, right? You can see there it says press F to reach target irrigation. All of my planter boxes have that 80%. This one's at 79, but it'll go back up to 80 soon. They have that 80% irrigation because this thing just keeps that at 80% and it just waters when it needs to provide 80%. I've got water pipes coming right to it from right over here. I've got my big osmosis filter. That osmosis filter is feeding all 4 of my big gardens in all of these big buildings out here and providing for 144 crop plots with just one osmosis filter to these 4 different automatic irrigation facilities. And then up there, your lighting, if you put it 2.5 buildings above, it can hit a 7x7 square. And then you just have to cut off the corners, right? So this is 7x7 here, and then the corners are cut off, and the middle one's cut off. And so I have 36 crop plots that are being watered by just one automatic waterer and one grow light. And the grow light has the same option. You press F, you choose how much light you want, and I have the perfect lighting for all of my plants. Well, I changed what was in these, so I actually don't have the perfect lighting for this set of plants right now. But all of my plants always have perfect lighting and all of that because those grow lights and that automatic irrigation system make it really, really easy. So the next thing we want to talk about is we want to talk about how to manipulate our growth of our plants. And that's really, really important. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to do that by using different fertilizers. I just got to get some food and water in me here real quick. So there's a couple of different kinds of fertilizer that you can have, and we're going to go over those real quick. So when you go to put your seed in your plant, you'll see down here it pops up another option, right? So you pop up your option here, and you'll have no fertilizer, regular fertilizer, fertilizer breeding boost, fertilizer yield boost, fertilizer mutation boost, fertilizer growth boost, and then there's a specialization fertilizer that you get from a mimetic specialization called the improved compound fertilizer. So let's go over each of these real quick. First, I want to go over the growth boost. That's just going to speed up how quickly your crops grow. So it's pretty cheap to make, really good fertilizer if you're going to be online and you're going to be harvesting your crops, because most of the crops take between about 4 and 12 hours to grow. So if you're maybe going to be online for 3 hours, you want to drop that growth boost fertilizer and then reharvest and replant all of your crops one time before you go to sleep, and then wake up the next morning and maybe pick up that crop again. Might be a good option for you. So depending on how often you're going to be online, this might be a good way to get some extra crops. Next thing we're going to want to look at is we're going to look at the breeding boost fertilizer. Breeding boost fertilizer is extremely important. And so I'm going to show you what you need to make it here. You make it right here at your advanced supplies workbench. Actually, any supplies workbench I think you could make it at. But your yield boost fertilizer, breeding boost fertilizer is made with scarlet calamus. So the scarlet calamus can be found way down here in all of these little lakes down here in the chalk hills. Also, if you're in the novice season and you're doing the tutorial, you can get a lot of scarlet calamus there. Pretty much all along any of these rivers, anywhere over here in these rivers, basically on the banks of all your water sources. In the first 3 or 4 zones, you're going to be able to find lots and lots of scarlet calamus, and that's really going to help you in the future because these fertilizers, they don't ever go bad. So you can make a ton of them early on and then use that throughout the game to help breed your crops. And the reason that's so important is because when you put a breeding boost fertilizer in with a crop, then instead of getting your 1 seed back when you harvest, you'll actually get 3 seeds of that type. So you're tripling your seeds within about 4 to 12 hours, depending on what crop you're growing. So if you're growing things like mushrooms that grow in about 4 hours, in a single day, I can go from, 3 or 4 mushrooms to 60 mushroom seeds. And then I can start planting a couple of these big 36 planter boxes that I've got going on easily with mushrooms, which I'm going to use for yield boost fertilizers and mutation boost fertilizers, which are really, really important. So you got to have your mushrooms. Mushrooms are super good. Now the next fertilizer we want to talk about is actually that yield boost fertilizer, something I get a lot of. Now normally when I harvest a mushroom, I will get either 3 or 5 mushrooms from a single harvest. If you put a yield boost fertilizer on it, you're actually going to get 8 every time. Now this is important because actually your contaminated fruits, like your contaminated berries, which I have here, can also receive these yield boost fertilizers. Also your breeding boost fertilizers work on your contaminated berries. So you can put those in here. Why is my water low here? I'm going to have to work on that. But you can put those in here and get extra yield. You'll actually get 8 berries from each of these contaminated plants if you use a yield boost fertilizer. And that's for your acid farm right there. We're going to talk a little bit about that a little later. So super important to get your yield boost fertilizers. They're really easy to make. It's just mushrooms and regular fertilizer. So that's really, really good for you. And then the last thing is your mutation boost fertilizer. Your mutation boost fertilizer gives you about a 35 to 40% chance to get a deviated crop. So if you have things like your aloe veras, your cucumbers, your corn actually is an important one to get some deviated crops for, so that you can make the Italian soup. So you can get more deviations, right? It takes 1 deviated corn and some onions. So you need those deviated corns to be able to make that Italian soup, which is much, much easier to make than the securement soup, because that securement soup requires this masala. And you can only get that masala by buying 3 a week over in the Tall Grass Inn. Or you can find these while you're doing your Blackfell run. So you're not going to get a ton of these. So you're not going to get to make a lot of securement soups. So you're going to be needing to use that Italian soup to sort of fill that out and get your deviations. But that mutation fertilizer just allows you to get more deviated crops. Now I did do some testing. I planted a whole 36 crops of the contaminated aloe vera. with mutation fertilizers, and I did not get any deviated aloe vera, so that does not work on contaminated crops. Actually, I didn't get anything from that mutated fertilizer, so it was just a complete waste. So do not put mutation fertilizer on your contaminated crops. So that's fertilizers, and then the last one is the legendary fertilizer that comes with that specialization, right? The mimetic specialization. This fertilizer increases your yield and increases your mutation chance, but actually reduces the growth speed, and it does not give you the breeding boost. So more plus more mutation chance and a slightly slower growth speed on that improved compound fertilizer. So it's a really, really good one. Definitely, if you're going to be mutating your crops anyway, might as well just use that improved compound and then actually get more deviated crops per pick when you do that. So really, really important there. If you get that specialization and you're a big gardener, you're definitely going to want to rock that. All right, so the next thing we want to talk about is we want to talk a little bit about some crops that you might be able to get that you can't actually grow at home. So there are 3 things that you cannot grow at home that you might need at some point, and that's bananas, coconuts, and apples. All of those come from trees, and you'll see trees with apples in them, or you'll see a banana tree, or you'll see a coconut, and you'll actually see coconuts up in the top of the tree. You just cut those trees down, and you get a chance to get a banana, a coconut, or an apple. And as of right now, that's the only way you can get those. Hopefully in the future, we'll get some way to grow those. Maybe have a consistent source of apples, right? You grow an apple tree in your base, and then every now and then maybe it generates an apple or something like that that you can pick. That would be really, really cool. The next thing I want to talk about is I want to talk about deviated crops. So deviated crops have a number of different modifiers that can help you improve your chance of getting deviated crops when you plant things. So when you take a look here, if you look in my corn here, I planted most of this with mutation fertilizers, but there are actually 3 different things that can help you get deviated crops. So there's always a small chance, right? Anything that you plant can potentially become a deviated crop, but it's not guaranteed. There's always a small chance though. But the things that can help you get more deviated crops is number 1, plant your crops in a polluted zone. Gives a very small chance to increase the number of deviated crops you're going to get. Number 2, if you're on a PvE server, or if you came from a PvE server previously, you can get a buzzy bee, and the buzzy bee will give an increased chance to mutate your crops. And the last one, and the most important and biggest boost that you can get to deviated crops, is that mutation fertilizer that gives you about a 35 to 40% chance to get deviated crops. So out of my 36 here, when I just put mutation fertilizers on them, I easily get between 10 and 15 mutated crops every time I do that. So I'm getting tons and tons of deviated vegetables because you get 2 per pick. So if I get a deviated corn here, I'll get 2 deviated corns. So every time I grow a crop with mutation fertilizers, I get somewhere between 20 and 30 of the mutated crops of the deviated version. So that's really, really good. That mutation fertilizer is super important. Does require stardust source and requires mushrooms. So again, mushrooms super important for getting crops going. And the last thing we need to talk about is we need to talk about contaminated crops. So contaminated crops are a new thing that was just recently added to the game. The reason it took me so long to get this video out is I was actually doing some testing with all the fertilizers and stuff like that, and just what's going to be the most valuable with these contaminated crops for maximizing your acid yield. And so it looks like these contaminated berries take about 12 hours to fully grow. The contaminated, these are actually about to grow, which is great. The contaminated aloe vera take about 24 hours to grow. And the big difference there is that when you put contaminated aloe vera in berries, right, you put these contaminated aloe vera and berries right in here, and they 3 to 1 with water. So for every 3 berries and 1 water, you get an acid. But for every 2 aloe vera and 1 water, you get an acid. But it takes twice as long. And when you pick your berries, when you pick berries normally, you get 3 to 5 berries. And when you pick berries with a yield boost fertilizer, you get 8. So you're actually going to get a larger yield than you would normally get with your aloe veras, but you're also going to be using more. So you get 2 2/3 acid per berry when you use a yield boost fertilizer, which is pretty huge because you can do that twice a day, right? If you log on twice, pick everything, and replant it with yield boosts, you can get that twice a day. So for every crop that you have, for every crop plot that you plant berries in with yield boost fertilizers, you will get 5 1/3 acid per day per crop plot. So I have 144 crop plots. If I planted all of them with yield boost fertilizers, which would require me to go farm mushrooms, but if I planted all 144, and then I can multiply that, so 144 times 5.33, I could get 767 acid a day from just the farms that I've got going on right now. That would be a pretty extreme acid farm and would require tons of mushrooms. I could get a buddy or something like that. They could grow all the mushrooms for me, and I could grow all of the contaminated crops, and we could share that or something. Would be a pretty easy way to do that. But contaminated crops are really, really great. Really good source of acid. Even just here in my 36 plot farm, I get a little over 100 acid a day, and that's enough for me. That makes as much tungsten as I need to make bullets. That makes, all that different stuff. So just a 36 plot farm, I think, is really, really useful for getting your acid going here. And also, again, the yield boost, the breeding boost, and the growth boost fertilizers will all work on these and help you increase that production based on what you want to use. So that's everything about how to get things planted, what you can plant, what the fertilizers do, and all that stuff. But now I want to talk a little bit about my recommendations for some things that are really important. Number one is your morels are really, really important because your canned seafood and oil, right? You have to have this if you're going to be getting gold, silver, star trace ore, all that stuff. Even if you're just out getting tungsten, this can be really, really important to help minimize the amount of time you spend out there gathering resources, because gathering resources is not the fun part of this game. So get you some morel seeds, bring them to your Eternal Land, carry them over with you into the new seasons, and use this canned seafood and oil because it's a really, really cheap recipe, because it just takes regular morels and a little corn oil and a little aluminum ingots and any random fish, and you can get this canned seafood and oil. So don't let people sucker you out of your currency, because they sell these for like 2 to 2.5K energy links, and they're just so easy to make. Don't let somebody sucker you out of your energy links. The next one that's really, really important is aloe veras. Aloe veras are kind of hard to get seeds for because they only grow in the Blackfell region, and there aren't a ton of them out there. So you're going to want to use those breeding boost fertilizers to get more seeds, but your crumbly bread requires 1 deviated aloe vera. So super duper important, because that's going to increase all weapon damage by 25%, right? This is a really good sort of silver bullet food to be using for any weapon that you want to be using. Any build that you've got is going to benefit significantly from that 25% weapon damage boost. So you definitely want to have access to the crumbly breads, especially as you get into hard and pro mode, and especially if you're on a hard mode server in Season 2. These are going to be a huge lifeline for you, really help you reach those DPS numbers that you're going to need for those endgame bosses. If you're on a PvP server, cucumbers are going to be important. Safety sandwiches reduce the damage from other players by 20%. That's huge. That gives you time to use healing items. That prevents one-shots from headshots with things like the Black Panther using Fortress Warfare to put out huge one-hit shots. Right, that's a huge thing on a PvP server right there. Some other things, I think, because you already have morels, you've got these deviated morels, you can make you some yanbao dumplings that sell for 10k energy links in case you don't have gold or silver ingots or anything like that. Don't lose your energy link potential by having to buy those ingots from other people. Get you some yanbao dumplings. It does require masala, so this can't be something that you do for every single week because you're not going to be able to get enough masala. But this is a great option to get you a little bit of extra energy links if you lack one of those other options. Your ghoul cookies become invisible for 3 minutes. Attacking will remove the invisibility effect. Requires deviated tomatoes. Deviated tomatoes are a great one to have. Cheese. I have a video out about ranching called The Everything Guide to Ranching. Check that out. Tell you a little bit about how to get some cheese from your ranching. And then your securement soups require deviated peppercorns. I think this is, again, an important one, but you're really going to need to go through each of these because some of them have some interesting effects, like increasing crit rate for Frost Vortex. You get your bacon burger, making mining and logging require just 1 strike. You've got your Stargazy Pie, which can increase your crit damage by 25% when your energy is full. Right, there's a lot of interesting options in here. Your Spectral Canned Mushroom is another one. Emit blinding light that stuns nearby monsters for 3 seconds every 5 seconds, right, requiring those deviated morels. That's a really good one for Leah Labs in your pro mode. Some really, really interesting stuff in here. You're just going to have to go through, look, find out what's important to you, and then bring those seeds in with you, at least the difficult ones to get, like the morels, like the aloe veras, like the peppercorns, like the cucumbers. Bring some of those in with you between seasons. Use those breeding boosts to get as many as you need, and then just carry them through to each season with yourself. And sort of the last thing that I think is important is you always need some corn and some wheat, because corn and wheat go in this barrel to give you some sort of alcohol. The corn gives you corn ale, and that corn ale makes it so you don't lose sanity for 30 minutes and gives you 100% hydration and cures 1000 sanity. So these are really, really important just to have a ton of on hand all the time. So you need corn and wheat to be able to do that and have those. So those are my recommendations on what you should be focusing on and what just some general silver bullet type things to grow. The other one, definitely mushrooms for all of your fertilizers, is going to be important. So I really hope you all enjoyed the video. I hope you get some use out of growing crops because a lot of people are sleeping on gardening and they're sleeping on these foods because the novice season was too easy. They weren't having to worry about it. Actually, next I'm going to be putting out a video talking about some of the utility items that you can make through the synthesis bench, because again, that's something that's being slept on. And in these hard mode servers, if you're not using everything that you have available to increase your DPS, to help you drop aggro or share aggro with something else, to help you stun enemies, right? Your win potions are important. If you're not using that stuff in the hard mode servers, in the late game, you're going to not be able to complete a lot of that content with any sort of decent success rate. So definitely look into gardening, get with your hive mates, get with your warband, coordinate who's going to grow what, and then make some of these foods when you go into that content. So thanks a lot. I really hope you got some use out of this. If you did, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe, and have a great day.